I'm Terry Ciani with High Prairie Life. I live on the High Prairie in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and I live my life organically, seasonally, and locally. And right now I am harvesting apples galore. I am up to my elbows in baskets and baskets of apples. And besides applesauce, which is a given, one of my favorite things to do is can apple pie filling. And that's what we're going to be making today. For this recipe today, it's making 1 quart. When I normally do it though, I want to fill my canner with 6 to 8 quarts. So I'll probably have 3 or 4 pots going on at one time and have all those apples so that when I do it, I can can all the jars that I've, put in the dishwasher, had them all ready, and then I can fill up my pot and just do a whole bunch at one shot. So today I'm going to peel, core, and slice with 2 different types of slicers for my apples, because when I'm doing that many, of course, I'm going through tons of apples and I don't want to sit there and have to hand peel and cut with just a knife. So I already have 4 cups of sliced, peeled, and cored apples with a little bit of lemon juice in it. So normally I will do 6 cups of apples. I cut them in 8ths after I've peeled and cored them. And then I'll toss them with about a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice, and that'll keep your apples from turning brown. And then I'm going to put a little sugar, 1 cup, in the pan, and we're going to let it sit and juice for better. So I wanted to show you, this is a hand crank that just suction cups on the counter, and I just can peel it really fast, which is marvelous. Take it off. And then when you have apples that you've grown for yourself or that you've picked up from neighbors, a lot of times there's going to be a tiny little bit of peel still left on, so I just clean it up. So that way when I go ahead and put through my little corer, which I love this little tool, especially when you're having to do a lot of apples at one shot. There you go. And then you might have a little tiny cleanup, but nothing like if you're going to have to hand peel and hand cut yourself. So that is all done. Get rid of a little seed here. Oh, got a little core. And then this other one, I love this tool too. It's a stripper. And I use it for potatoes, for pears, for apples. And I just have to press the button and away I go. And that is great when I'm doing a ton of mashed potatoes as well. Love this tool. And I utilize all these peels and cores. I raise bobwhite quail and wild pheasant, and they think this is just candy. And if I have a ton of it, which I will be because I'm going to be cranking like crazy to get all these apples done, I have laundry baskets full. I'll also put some out for the deer. I'll also put it out for my compost pile. So nothing really goes to waste. And then here's my handy dandy little corer again. It takes a little elbow grease, but it sure works the nuts. And again, sometimes you have a little bit of that hard membrane there in the apple. You want to take that out because you certainly don't want to bite into that when you're eating a nice slice of apple pie. So I'm going to go ahead. I only needed to add 1 extra cup now because I had already peeled some apples prior. So I'm going to throw these in my pot. And then I'm going to put some more lemon juice on top because, as I said, you don't want to have your apples start turning brown. You want them to stay nice and they look gorgeous in your jar when you're all done. So again, I'm just going to put about a tablespoon in and just toss. And there's what they look like. Now what I'm going to do, I've put the lemon juice in, I've got my apples, I'm going to throw in a cup of sugar, and I'm just going to let this set for about 15 to 20 minutes because what you really want it to do is to start juicing before we boil. And we're only going to boil it for 1 minute in about 15 to 30 minutes, and I'll show you what it looks like when it is really juicing up. I let these apples sit for 30 minutes, and I want to show you the juice that I get. Hopefully you can see it in the bottom, and it's thickened up naturally from the natural pectin that's in the apple juice, but also from the sugar. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1/3 cup. You can do apple juice or apple cider. I prefer organic with everything that I do. I didn't want to have gluten in my pie filling, so I'm not adding flour. I wanted to use a quick tapioca, so I'm putting that in as well, and that was 2 tablespoons. I personally prefer cinnamon. I don't use as much nutmeg for myself, but I'm making this apple pie filling for one of my daughters. So I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of nutmeg ground and a half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. All right, I'm going to let this come to a boil, and I'm going to let it boil for 1 minute. And while that's doing that, I just wanted to share with you that when my husband and I moved on to this old 1890 farmstead, it had a wonderful old apple orchard in it. I still actually have one of those old trees that still produces apples after all these years, probably 80 years now. And I wanted to rebuild my orchard, so I started learning about the history of my area. And between Piedmont, South Dakota, and Spearfish, South Dakota, it's a very fertile valley, maybe approximately 35 miles apart from each other. Early 1900s, tons of apple trees, and that was part of the industry at that point in time. In the 1930s, a really bad blight came and wiped out almost everything. And some folks like to go taking hikes and graft onto old apple, take a branch and graft it onto a tree at their house so they can see what kind of old apples used to be in these orchards. And I found out from one of the old timers that when he actually, a few years later after grafting, he got an apple. When he cut into it, the flesh was pink. I am dying to find out what tree that is because I would love beautiful pink applesauce and pink apple pie. Well, this is boiled for 1 minute, and hopefully you'll be able to see a little bit. The apple cider and the tapioca and the wonderful juices, the color is just gorgeous. The apples are still nice and light, and they're not cooked down. I'm not making an applesauce. All I'm doing is thickening the juice and the sugars that we had been adding and the tapioca. So when I put it in my canning jar, which is what we're going to do now, I have my canner. It's been boiling. I boiled my canning jars so they're sterile, and I also sterilized my lid and my screw top in this small saucepan. So we're going to put this in a quart jar, and then I'm going to go ahead and can that with all my other jars. And then I'm going to have this wonderful pie filling to have all season long. So I am all set. I've got my sterile canning jar on a towel. You don't want to put something really hot on something cold, it'll crack on you. I have one of those collapsible little funnels, which are so handy. And then I'm going to go ahead and take this apple pie filling that we just finished boiling for 1 minute, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this in the pot. Get all the nice juice, and it smells marvelous. I wish I could send it to you through the computer. It smells wonderful. All right, get that packed in there. You only want to go up to the top of the first part of your rim, right here. You want about a ½ inch headspace because you need that lid. After you've processed it, you want it to suck down and seal the top of your jar. So that way you make sure that you have a really good seal. I'm going to get a little extra juice in here because you want it, like I said, to go all the way up to the halfway point. I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit more juice in here so it's got all that nice seasoning and filling in it. And that's why, too, I tend to do a little bit extra. Now, if you find your apples are dry, go ahead and add, you can always add a little bit more of your apple juice or apple cider. I'm going to squish this down a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to always take a damp paper towel and just wipe the rim because you want a nice good seal on that. So this is all ready to go. As I said, this recipe makes 1 quart. When I do it, normally I'm going to do 6 to 8. You can do 10, whatever you want to do, depending on how many apples and how ambitious you are. And I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on now and get this ready for the canner. Now, if you have a little bit of apple and juice still left in the, oh, this is so hot. Hang on a second. If you have anything left in your pan, don't forget, if you make pork chops that night, that with some nice acorn squash and some of that apple pie filling, you could fill that in your acorn squash when you're baking it in the oven. And between the pork and the apple, that would just be wonderful. Oh, that is hot. Okay, you just want it on snug. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this over to the canner, and we're going to process this now. Always keep a towel. Again, you don't want anything hot to cold. I'm going to process this now for 30 minutes. When it's done, take it out, put it back on a towel till it's totally cool. Make sure you hear that little pop or double check. Right now you can hear that. You don't want to hear that when you're all done. It should be a nice tight seal. 30 minutes of processing, letting it cool on the towel. No more pop, beautifully sealed. If you'll notice, there's no little pearls of tapioca. Everything is thickened naturally and beautifully inside this canning jar. Even though it's tough for me to let it out of my cupboard, I will share this as a gift sometimes. And just a little cute red and white string and a little apple. Who wouldn't love to get a jar like this? Thanks so much for sharing part of your day with me.